Hey guys, today I want to show you a game that I just played, which has a really interesting lesson to be learned about how to defend your king when it's being attacked by a pawn storm. So in this game, I actually castled kingside, and my opponent castled queenside, so we had opposite side castling, and then my opponent attacked me with a pawn storm. I was kind of trying to attack over on this side, but I ended up having to defend my king, and I want to show you some of the techniques involved there, and one in particular. And there was also a really nice tactic, which I actually missed in this game that my opponent could have done, but he didn't see it, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to find that as well. So I think you're going to learn something and enjoy this game. Let's take a look. All right, so here we go. D4, knight f6. So I decided to not play the England gambit this time and go for the King's Indian, which is a more solid approach. He plays f3 right away. I probably should have played d5 just because I had the option to shut down e4, but I was moving real quickly and I wasn't expecting this, and I think I had maybe pre-moved g6 or something. So we ended up transposing into a samish. Now, the normal way that we would have gotten to this position would be if white started with d4, c4, knight c3, e4, and then played f3, right? My opponent obviously did f3 first. It doesn't really matter. We get the same position. I think it's worse for white this way because I could have prevented it with d5. But in this case, we end up just going to the King's Indian samish. So I castled bishop e3. I played e5. This is kind of the main line here. And I was hoping for d5. Not really hoping. I was expecting d5. d5 is the more common move. This is also a version. Against d5, there's a line that I haven't really gotten to play too often, but it's basically knight h5, setting up the queen check. Most people play queen d2, and you can play queen h4 check. And after g3, it looks like you're able to take this because you've got the pin on the rook, which is what I would have done. But after queen f2, now it's actually my queen that's pinned. And so when you go into this line, you have to be willing to sacrifice your queen, which I was. I was going to take on f1, allow the queen capture, take the bishop. So you get two bishops and a couple pawns, because I'm actually going to get this pawn, right? Because white has to stop the fork here. So probably something like queen f2 and take the pawn. So you get two bishops and two pawns for the queen. So it's a very interesting position. Supposedly better for white according to the engine, but I think it's hard for white to play because there's not a lot of weaknesses, and you do have these two bishops, which is not going to be easy for the queen to deal with. Anyway, it looks like a lot of fun. I haven't got a chance to play it often, but I was hoping for that. This game didn't happen. Opponent played knight g to e2 instead. Okay, so I couldn't remember the theory here. I didn't remember what I was supposed to play. I looked back at my notes and I had like e takes d4, but I just played knight c6. It seemed like a good developing move. Then I took it and traded the knight, developed the bishop, and here we go. So now we see castles queenside. I'm over here. So most of the time when this happens, especially in samish where the pawn's on f3, white is set up for an attack on the king side. I knew that, and so I said, okay, let's go ahead and start some operations on the queen side. This is kind of what you want to do. Opponent wanted to get out of this, I believe. There could be some lines where the bishop can end up going there, and so that was probably a smart decision. b5. So if you count the pieces here, I'm actually losing a pawn. I don't really care because what I would like to do is open up the diagonal and open up the files for my pieces so I can attack the king. A pawn probably isn't going to matter in this game. Most likely it's going to come down to something bigger than that, checkmate or a big, big blunder or something. So b5, sacrificing the pawn. Opponent didn't take it, played knight to d5, which I think was a smart decision. I think because if you look at this position after like takes, now it's really dangerous for white, and I'm going to be able to bring my queen over, push this pawn, probably bring the queen maybe here and this rook over. It's going to be hard for white to defend that. Both of my bishops are aiming that way, so anyway, that's what I was going for. Didn't happen. Like I said, knight to d5. Okay, what did I play here? I traded some stuff, I think. Yeah, we got some trades. h4. Okay, h5. I wanted to slow down the attack here. I didn't want to just let that pawn come in and open up the h file right away. But now g4 happens. And now I have to kind of decide, what am I going to do here, right? Of course, this is a free pawn, but the issue is if I take it, white's probably going to just ignore that and push this pawn and get ready to open up the rook. The queen's going to come in, and it gets very scary. So I invite you guys, if you'd like to pause and try to think about this position, but how would you defend yourself in this position? So if white just played g4, it's your move, and what would you play? All right, well, if you've had a chance to look at that, the move that I actually played was h takes g4. So I know I just said, well, what about h5, right? Well, that's what my opponent played. And the reason that I did this is because of this little idea, right? And so again, if you want to pause, here's another opportunity. It's kind of the same question as before, but you want to move, further along. What do you think I played here? And if you get a chance to look at that, the move is g5. And it's kind of a weird move at first. It's like, well, you've got so many things you could take, right? You could take this, you could take this, you could do something else. Why are we pushing the pawn? And the main idea is we want to keep this rook away from our king. Okay, rooks are very powerful pieces. And if you pair that with a queen, there's going to be all sorts of checkmate opportunities for white. I don't want to allow that rook to get into the game and affect my king, right? And if I take, well, guess what? The rook's involved, and I'm losing. It's over for me. Okay, so that's one thing. If I, let's just say, take here, guess what? The rook's involved again, and again, it's not going to be good news for me, right? So the reason we push is because this pawn is now not able to be traded off, and that's the key point here, right? We don't want that pawn traded because it blocks the rook. Rooks can't go through their own pieces. So I'm actually perfectly safe as long as I don't take that pawn, right? Now I say that, but I actually did find a way to mess this up, and I'll give you guys, I'll show you that in just a second here. So h6, and here is where I made my big blunder. So I captured here. I thought to myself, hey, it's a free pawn. If he pushes, I'm going to move my king, and that's what I wanted. But this was a really bad move, and so I'll give you guys a chance. What do you think white could have played here to win the game basically immediately? And I completely missed this move if you want to pause and try to find it. All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is actually queen takes g5 check. It's an amazing queen sacrifice, and the point is that if I take it, this is just mate in one. Just checkmate with a pawn, just like that. It's pretty amazing, right? So that's the idea, which means I can't take the queen, which means I have to move my king. If I go to h8, it's mate in 3. So look at this one. Check, takes, have to go here and mate with the rook. Another really nice mate. Again, with the queen sacrifice. So going back here, I would have to go to h7. And it looks like I can survive a little bit longer, but it's bad news. Queen takes f6. I have to play rook to g8. And I just come out losing a bunch of material. We get this position where I'm just down, what am I down, a rook and a bishop? Completely lost, okay, completely lost. So that's what my opponent had. They didn't see it, I didn't see it. They played h7 check. So what I should have done, instead of taking that, is I should have blockaded the pawn right away. King h7, that's what I needed to play. And notice how the rook can't get to my king, which was my idea. I just thought I was gonna have time to do it later because I missed the queen sacrifice, right? But this is what I should have done. I was a little bit concerned about the diagonal too, but it turns out that it's actually just fine. So that's the idea. Okay, what I took, opponent missed that, played h7 and then king h8. Okay, so at this point I'm winning again. Okay, that was white's sort of one chance to win this attack, to make this attack work, and they missed it. And now my king is totally safe, right? This pawn is not going anywhere, which means this rook is never going to be able to attack my king along this file until I'm ready. Once maybe some things get traded and I'm ready, I can bring my rook around and capture that pawn later, okay? So this is the idea that I wanted you guys to remember when you're defending against a pawn storm. Sometimes if you can push your pawn by, leave that h-pawn, and it prevents the rook from coming in, you're going to be good, right? So, okay, so that's what happened. Rook came down here, traded some things. I just blocked off that diagonal. It looks a little scary, but I'm actually totally fine. Everything's defended. And like I said, I don't have to worry about the rook. So we traded some stuff here. I just brought my queen over to sort of help out some more, put some pressure on the rook. And there was one more little tricky moment here. So I set a trap right here. Opponent did not see it and played this move. And now I invite you guys, if you want to pause, what did I play here and why? All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook to a5. And the point is that we've got a discovered check on the king, which means we can move this rook wherever we want. It puts the king in check. And so I'm going to move the rook here because it attacks the queen. The only way that the queen could stop the check would be to come back to d3, but that's undefended and we can just take it. So white has to lose the queen, basically. And yes, they're able to get, excuse me. Yes, they can get my queen back, but I'm still going to get a rook. So I'm still going to be up a rook. and a bunch of pawns, and it's just over. Played a few more moves, and an opponent resigned here. So going back, the key takeaway, and this is what I want you guys to remember when you are facing a pawn storm, right? So if we go all the way back to, right around here, I think is when some people start to sort of fall apart a little bit. So h5, I wanted to slow down the attack, but I also saw the idea of takes here and g5, right? So keep that in your mind. If you can push by, leave the pawn, and then tuck your king somewhere in front of the pawn and just leave it there, it blocks off the rook. That's the key idea that you want to take away. It looks different in every game. It's not going to be the exact same position as this, most likely, but it is an idea that you want to think about and see if it could work, okay? Because a lot of times that will save you when you're being attacked. So hopefully you learned something from that game and enjoyed that one, and I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.